Hey guys, it's the WalterFootball.com After Dark show for October 18, 2024. We're going to be doing the Week 7 NFL picks, Thursday thoughts. Before we intro our co-host, please hit like, subscribe, comment below, share this video. Visit the link in the description for the merch store. As you can see, I am wearing a Walter Football t-shirt, and for the avid viewers who watched this show on Tuesday with Evan and then yesterday with Kenny, you might notice, hey, isn't that the same t-shirt Walt's been wearing the past 3 days? And yes, that is the case. That's what happens when you have 2 kids under 3 years old. You don't get to have like clean clothes or anything like that. So bear with me here. But you can go to the merch store and buy a lot of t-shirts here. I'm going to be releasing a new t-shirt soon. I'm going to be working on it tonight, actually, after the show. So I think by Tuesday it'll be available. But we're actually having a 20% off sale right now. So feel free to take advantage of that. That would help us out a lot. Or submit super chats, super stickers. That helps us out the most. We had a great super chat yesterday from Slew, 555. The previous day, John Sanders. Before that, we had Germ. So you guys have been so amazing with your contributions. Just really means so much. So that keeps us going because YouTube ads, as I always say, pay nothing. So any help's really appreciated. Also, you can go to Amazon, buy my books, Jokes to the College Years. That is my most recent one. And then How the 2020 MVP Was Stolen. These 2 books, buying them would help as well. So we are joined tonight once again by Andy Isco. Andy, how are you? And how's your week 6?
Walter, I'm very good this evening. It was a pretty good week 6. Certainly in the NFL, it was very good. In the colleges, so-so. But that's been the season in the college has been very unpredictable. I've had a much more success in the NFL this year, which I'm very happy about, getting a good read on these teams, and I hope it continues. And looking forward to week 7. We've now got, it's hard to believe, the NFL season's already 1/3 complete. The college season, for all intents and purposes, is basically half over. The season just flies by, and 6 down, 12 to go. It's still a lot of time to go, but it got here very quickly.
Yeah, it's gone by in a flash so far. It seemed like only yesterday I was meeting you at the Tuscany to enter in the contest, and
that was early in the sign-up. That was back, I believe, in July, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was mid-July, and it seemed like the season's so far away, a month and a half, and now it's a third of the way over, as you said. So so hopefully the next 2/3 are even better. We've had some bad luck on our end, including Bills Jets on Monday night. Felt like there's a million ways the Jets could have covered the spread in that game, and it just didn't go well. But hopefully we recover, and we got off to a good start this week. We had the Broncos tonight. We also had Spencer Rattler under, which hit. Unfortunately, we had Devon Vele over, and he had 2 penalties negating his over. So that was kind of sad. But so hitting 2 out of 3 plays, I'll take that all the time. So we'll start with the London game. It's the 3rd of 3 London games. There is one Germany game later in week 10, but this is the final one. Thankfully, I really hate these games, as I keep saying. Patriots at the Jaguars, or Patriots versus the Jaguars. Technically at the Jaguars, I suppose. The Jaguars are they're 5.5-point favorites. I've seen some 6s out there. Looks like there's some sharp money coming in on Jacksonville, which is not a surprise because the Sharps have been on Jacksonville, although they haven't gotten it right. They were on Jacksonville on Monday night against Buffalo. That was incorrect. They were on Jacksonville last week against the Bears. That was also incorrect. So we'll see if the Sharps keep losing here. I actually do like Jacksonville. I think this home field advantage is almost unparalleled, where they're not really at home, but it's their home away from home, and their body clocks are adjusted to London time. That gave them a huge edge last year against Buffalo. I think it's going to be the same thing here. With you have a rookie head coach traveling overseas. You have a rookie quarterback traveling overseas. This is the first time, obviously, they've done this. So I think that's a big advantage for Jacksonville. One thing you have to watch out for is Drake May had an MRI on his knee. Now, he's been practicing fully, so I don't quite understand what happened there. I do expect them to play, but just something to look out for on the Friday injury report. So, Andy, do you have any thoughts on this game? Because I really like Jacksonville.
Yeah, I find it really hard to lay any points with the Jacksonville team right now that has had so much difficulty closing out games. Now, New England opens the season with a win at Cincinnati as a 7.5-point underdog. That's been their only cover of the year. The following week, they go home and they went to overtime, getting +3 against Seattle. That was a push, and of course they've lost and failed to cover, lost against the spread their next 4 games. The record isn't much better with Jacksonville. They do have 2 covers this year, both of them coming in losses, and they have 3 games in which they were favored. They've lost 2 of them. When they were favored against Cleveland in week 2, that 18-13 loss, and last week in London against Chicago, they ended up being the favorite. And the week before, many of us got a win with Jacksonville in that game because the line was 2.5 for much of the week. Went up to 3, but it actually closed at most books at 3.5. So they won that game, and they didn't cover in that one. And again, part of their problem was they had a 10-point fourth quarter lead against the Colts. Okay, so you figure, they won by 3, so maybe they kicked the field goal. And went up, and Indianapolis came back. No, Indianapolis ended up tying the game up with a field goal and a touchdown, and then Jacksonville covered. So I can't see laying points with Jacksonville, especially since the money has come in on Jacksonville. I mean, look, last week, I cannot for the life of me find out why everybody was on the Jaguars. They started out at 2-point. I like Chicago as a 2-point favorite in the game, ended up getting +1.5 on them at kickoff, despite the fact that they arrived late on Friday. Chicago had been there earlier in the week, so they had a greater time of being acclimated. And, you say you're acclimated with, Jacksonville's acclimated. Now, I do agree that is an advantage this week. But the fact that they were acclimated last year, 52 weeks ago, to last week, 52 weeks later, I don't know that necessarily carries over from one year to the next, even though they may have played there. So I didn't understand it as a factor last week. In fact, as I mentioned, Chicago was there longer than Jacksonville was. A little bit more this week, but still, how can I certainly can't feel comfortable laying any point. It's almost like everybody was taking Carolina early in the season. Well, finally they won a game when they covered against the Raiders, and then they didn't cover against Carolina, and then they played last week. So at some point, you revert back to what you do best, and what Jacksonville does best is blow late leads and covers.
Well, hopefully this lead is so large that they can't blow it, because you're right. That's all they've done.
I thought a 10-point lead against the Colts in the fourth quarter was a pretty large lead.
Yeah, that's true. But the Patriots have been so bad, maybe they'll be up by 20 or 30. We'll see. I don't know. This team has been such a mess, and I don't understand why they got in late last week. You think
I think it was effects from the hurricane.
Okay,
that affected Tampa a lot.
That's true. I didn't think of that.
I don't know how much Jacksonville was affected, but I don't think the hurricane hit until Wednesday or Thursday, and Chicago got in there like on Tuesday. And I don't think Chicago had any concerns about the weather, but why couldn't Jacksonville have done the same thing, knowing that there was going to be a hurricane? They didn't know exactly where in Florida it was going to hit and affect, but they knew it was going to sometime later in the week. Now maybe it's easy to say in retrospect, but Chicago was smart enough to get out there early. Now maybe they felt it was because Jacksonville had an edge that going in there because of their familiarity, and they just wanted to get in there and make it as normal as possible after 4 or 5 days of being on London time with all your activities. But that still would not be a reason why Jacksonville should not have been thinking along. Now, if there were no hurricane threat, okay, maybe getting in there on Friday made sense. It probably worked for them in the years past. But knowing that there was that threat and it could affect the takeoff time for coming out of I don't know if they left out of Jacksonville or somewhere else, but nonetheless, that seemed to be a little bit of a surprise.
Yeah, I actually do wonder if they were distracted by the hurricane. I didn't think of that. So it's a good point. Although
even in their playing of the game, not knowing how many, because not everybody on Jacksonville lives in Jacksonville. They may live in other parts of Florida that were affected, and so with the time they were playing the game, there was 3 or 4 days of aftermath of that hurricane, and being away since Friday, you may not have known about some of the people who were dealing with some of those after effects. It's only normal. It's not a typical distraction that you might normally have, for example, and we can talk about it, when we get to the Raiders and the Rams.
Yeah. John saying if Jaguars lose to another rookie quarterback in England, Peterson's going to be fired. Yeah, they may not let him on the plane. They may have him take a raft home at that point. Just an embarrassment here for the Jaguars if that happens. Let's go to the main Sunday slate. We start with Seattle at Atlanta. The injury report I have here so far: Tyreek Woolen and Trey Brown, Seattle's top two cornerbacks, were out of practice both days, so they could be without both of them, which sounds like a nightmare against Atlanta's receivers. I liked Seattle before seeing this injury news. Now, maybe one of them will come back for Friday and play, so we'll see. But I do like the spot Seattle's in. They're coming off extended rest. It was a blowout loss on national TV, so I think they're going to be playing at their best. Whereas Atlanta, they had a couple wins. 2 weeks ago they beat the rival Buccaneers in overtime. Last week they blow out the Panthers, and then next week they have to play Tampa again. So it feels like they have bigger fish to fry here. I don't know if we're going to see Atlanta at its best. And Atlanta plays a lot of close games. They kick a lot of field goals in the red zone. They could win this game and win by 2, kind of like they did against New Orleans a few weeks ago. So I like Seattle here, provided they have one of their cornerbacks in this game. But we'll see. Who do you like in this game?
I've gone a little bit back and forth on this game, but the better cases that I'm making are for Atlanta for a number of reasons. I think they have a decided edge at quarterback in Kirk Cousins. We've seen him certainly recover nicely from the injury that cost him, last season, a good part of last season. Coming over to a new team that is a young team, and he brings that veteran experience that I think pays dividends over the course of a season. We remember that the game against, Philadelphia, where they led that late drive that showed his leadership ability, and the players are buying in. The coach getting accustomed to the Atlanta personnel. I think Atlanta is one of those teams, and remember, their season win total was like 9 or 9.5 or something. And often when you see a team like that, the Jets were another one, they don't necessarily start off by going 3-1 and saying, hey, you were all right at the start of the season, because there are struggles when you've got like new coaches, new quarterbacks and things like that, new systems. And you like to see the progression that a team like Chicago has made this year. A team like Washington has made this year, although they made their progression very, very quickly in a similar situation, rookie coach, rookie quarterback. Atlanta seems to have done the same. Now, last week it was Carolina, but it was a convincing win for them as far as getting a margin on the Panthers. I understand a lot of people liking Seattle. I've seen right now a line at Seattle 2.5 minus 20, and I've seen Atlanta now. Atlanta minus 2.5 minus 20, or minus 3 evens are out there now as well. I'm inclined to like Seattle because Atlanta. Let me say I am inclined to like Atlanta. I'm not so sure. Well, first of all, I'm not that thrilled with the Seattle defense this year compared to years past. I think Atlanta's is getting actually somewhat better as the season progresses, and again, that's familiarity with new coaches in place. So if I were to play it, and I haven't yet, I would feel comfortable if I couldn't get the 2.5, if the 3 remains at even money. But if I make a decision to play, which I'll probably do within the next 24 hours, I'll be looking to lay 2.5.
Okay. I do like teasing Seattle up to 8.5. I think that
I can see that.
Yeah, that would be one of my teaser legs if I find another one.
For me, that's, by the way, that for me, that would be a numbers play, getting 3, 4, 7, 8 in there, going 2.5 to 8.5. When you're going with, I won't say a quality team, but if you rank the teams A, B, and C, Seattle's a B team. So if you've got a B team, which is a competent team, a team that probably has a chance to finish, 8 and 9, 9 and 8 or better, but not be, let's say, not be favored to make the playoffs or certainly be a contender. Those are the kind of teams, unless they're playing an elite team that, is one of the top teams. I would say Atlanta is probably, right now I'd put them at a B+. So a B playing a B+ is worth teasing up over 8.
Yeah, and I always say that if you do a teaser, make sure the 2 games are started at separate times so you can try to middle the second game. So, for example, if you take Seattle plus 8.5 and that leg wins, and your second leg is, let's say, Washington minus 2, you could bet Carolina +8 and try to get the middle. The 3, 6, and 7 are the three most.
And you might actually get a better middle because, as we know, favorites often will be bet as we get closer to game time as the public gets involved. So you might have Washington -1.5, and then you might get Carolina plus 9.5, maybe, if the line gets bet up. From 7.5 to 9.5.
Yeah, I think that's a good strategy. So yeah, make sure those two teaser legs start at a different time.
And keep in mind, by the way, also that you do have to hope that the first game ends earlier because the 10:05 starts versus the 1:15 and the 1:25. So we've seen a lot of those 10:05 starts end up going past 1:15, 1:30. I'm talking Eastern time there.
Yeah,
no, Pacific time. I'm sorry, Pacific time.
Yeah, sure. You can always bet it live, but you might get trapped where you don't get the best line. So that is a good point. All right, let's get to the next game. Titans at the Bills.
Actually, by the way, just getting back to that example you used, you might not mind seeing Washington get a field goal first in that game, and you can get 10.5 with Carolina.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Bigger middle for sure. All right, next game's Titans at the Bills. This is another team, Tennessee, that might be without both of the starting cornerbacks. Chidobe Awuzie was already in IR. And L'Jarius Sneed has missed both practices. He's actually been pretty bad.
It's too bad It's too bad they will be with their starting quarterback.
I know. Will Levis is just a disaster. He didn't even throw for 100 passing yards last week. Truly one of the most remarkable stat lines you'll ever see. Calvin Ridley had 8 targets and no catches. As I said yesterday, he became the first receiver to have 0 catches on 8+ targets in 12 years. So it's some amazing futility Tennessee has here.
You wonder if the coach might have gotten a hint after, say, the first 5 or 6.
Yeah, and remarkably, I watched all 8 of the.
Although I didn't see the game, so how many of those targets being missed were his fault or Levis's fault?
So yeah, I watched all 8 of those targets. 1 was intercepted, and 3 were dropped interceptions. So
okay, dropped interceptions. Okay,
yes, dropped interceptions. There could have been 4 interceptions thrown of the 8 passes to Ridley. So that was it was quite the.
So he was a target only because he was in the neighborhood of the defenders.
Yeah, and really, he only had 2 targets in the first half, and a lot of it was late. And then he complained to the media about not getting targets early. And I'm thinking, like, hey, Calvin, you had a choice. You could have taken the money, or you could have gone to a winner. And he took the money, which I respect. You can't argue that these guys don't get paid into the late 30s and 40s and so on. So I understand taking the money, but if you do take the money, you can't complain about your situation because that's what you signed up for. So anyway, we have this game. The line is up to 9.5. It doesn't feel quite high enough. I don't like taking teams off the short week with a win on national TV. Just feels like the Bills might be a little flat, but even if they're operating at like 80%, just might be enough to blow out Tennessee, which is a complete disaster, especially with their defense falling apart with those injuries. So I'm on the Bills. I don't think this is going to quite make the contest card. Do you like any other side of this game?
I can't play Tennessee. I just the one concern or the one reason I might consider Tennessee, especially if that line goes to 10 or higher, is the fact that they are number 1 in the NFL in defensive yards per play allowed, which is good against a Buffalo team that has not been as sharp, I think, since they had that 47-10 win against Jacksonville back in week 3. They've scored 10, 20, and 23 points in the following 3 weeks, including that 35-10 week against a loss at Baltimore the week after that. Jacksonville were out. So whether that's enough to get me on, I wish Buffalo were playing a different team so I could see that offense get healthy again, because remember, they played the Jets last week, another very good defensive team, and they didn't really put up a lot of points in that one. So I would have liked to have seen Buffalo laying 9.5 against, say, let's say a Carolina, or even a team. Well, I won't say the Rams because they've got a good offense, but their defense is not very good this year. So I would have liked to have seen Buffalo playing. If I'm going to lay 9.5 with them, I would like them to be facing, a bottom half of the league defense, let's say.
Yeah. Something to keep in mind is I say this every week. Will Levis has thrown an interception in every single game this year. So just betting the over a half of an interception on him has been great. I'm currently not seeing any lines on that on FanDuel, but I'm sure those will appear unless they don't want them to appear. But I think this is the first time I'm not seeing a line on that.
Well, what, you're not seeing -0.5, or you're not seeing any number? Because I could understand them if they went with -1.5.
Yeah, I could. Yeah,
and didn't offer the -0.5.
Yeah, I do wonder if it's a little early in the week to post that. I'm sure they're going to have a line on that eventually. On
No, they might, but maybe they won't have -0.5.
Yeah,
over a half.
Or the juice is probably going to be pretty. Yeah, actually on DraftKings, I'm seeing over a half -155 on Will Levis.
There you go.
Which is still seems pretty good. Just he's so terrible. Yeah, like saying really wants more targets from Levis, I would be asked for fewer. That's true.
Actually, if they wanted to do something there, they could do just They could do -110 each week on the one. Yeah. And give themselves a possibility for a push, meaning that instead of paying off a price on going over a half, they'll give you money back on one, and if you're going to go over one and take a chance, you'll need two, and then maybe that's where you get your payday. But they're protected from. I'm not going to say it's an almost certainty that he has one, even though he's done it every game, but there is risk in putting up -0.5 and even charging a high vig. If you're going to lose, giving up at least one, at least give the player their money back if it hits exactly on one. Let them take the risk to go over a higher number and require two to get paid.
Yeah, it's a good idea for them. I feel like if we keep trending this way, we'll probably see it. Although Levis is probably going to be benched before that happens. So, all right. Next game is we have Cincinnati at Cleveland. Cincinnati was favored by 6.5. It's down to 6. Looks like some sharp money taking the Browns, which not a surprise given how well Cleveland has played against Cincinnati. Joe Burrow has never won in Cleveland, which is pretty remarkable. Ethan Posick is back to practice this week, so he was limited on Thursday, which means Cleveland might have its entire offensive line except for Wyatt Teller. That was the first time they had their tackles last week. They had Jack Conklin and Jedrick Wills on the field for the same time against the Eagles, and they almost won. They covered pretty easily. Deshaun Watson had a terrible first half, but he was 11 of 11 in the second half until one incompletion late. So they played pretty well. Now I know they traded Amari Cooper, but they get Nick Chubb back, and I think that it might make the Bengals respect the run here. And I think the Bengals coming off a national TV win, granted it's still against the Giants, I think they could be a little flat here, and I like Cleveland to maybe even pull the upset. I think Cincinnati just plays so poorly in Cleveland. Myles Garrett just dominates this offensive line routinely. I just think it's a good matchup for the Browns. So I'll be on Cleveland. Do you have any thoughts on this game?
I think we're thinking the same way here. I'm also looking at Cincinnati in this game. Would not be shocked by the upset. You mentioned some of the positives for the Browns as far as getting health. They're getting stronger with some of the players coming back. Still have some concerns about Watson. The Cleveland Browns have not scored 20 points in any of their 6 games this season. But another thing I also like about the game is they're coming home after 3 straight road games. Mm-hmm. And that should be a positive as well after traveling. What's the home field advantage? Well, I think part of the home field advantage is that the visiting team loses some preparation and practice time by the fact that they have to fly to an opposing city that takes up, half a day or whatever it is between getting set, getting to the airport, getting everything all set, getting checked into the hotel, whatever. That's time that the home team is sitting at home or at their facility preparing for the upcoming opponent. So I think that, it's not so much that the team is playing at home that is an advantage to a certain extent. It's the fact that the road team is losing preparation time and therefore it doesn't have the same ability to be as well prepared as the home team does. So I look at it in those terms, but I do think that they are playing a team that they have had success against. Now, of course, Cincinnati could use, and again, Cincinnati is going to be desperate to win every game they're playing because of their poor start. And they could very well be saying, hey, you need a little extra motivation or another reason to do your best. Joe, you've never won here in Cleveland, and we keep hearing about it, the state rivalry and everything. I think they're going to be motivated every way, but at the same time, Cleveland's going to be extremely motivated because this will be the best team that they will have put on the field this season, considering who they should be with, and some of the players that they've missed. Now, at the same time, I'm trying to gauge the impact of losing Amari Cooper, of getting rid of him. And my understanding is the players were not all that upset as you might think. That is. I also wonder about the situation with Stefanski. And I think it comes down from the owner as to why he hasn't given Jameis Winston a chance. Now, I don't know that Winston would have done any better with the offensive line that Cleveland's put out there for this year, but at least give him an opportunity to show something, because the players, they got to be sick of losing, and they have to be looking at the stubbornness, regardless of the valid reasons regarding the offensive line, but the stubbornness of trying to at least give an established NFL quarterback a chance to see if maybe he could do something that Watson hasn't been able to do. So I think there's a little bit of internal turmoil, but I think maybe getting rid of Cooper wasn't a terrible thing. And I think, again, having a better roster, better 52-man roster this week as far as who can take the field, I think is a positive. I would not be shocked by the upset. I hope this line goes up a little bit more. Certainly given Cleveland, I want to know what to make out of Cincinnati's defensive effort last week. But the point is, even in the 17-7 win, they were still outgained by a few yards by the Giants, I think 309 to 304. More importantly, the Giants still averaged about 6 yards, I think 5.9 yards per play against the Giants. So maybe Cleveland has a defense that they can get healthy against, even though the statistics might suggest that, hey, they fixed a lot of things. Look what they did against the Giants, 7 points.
Yeah. It's the Giants kicked themselves just repeatedly in that game. They just shot themselves in the foot so many times. Felt like they could have scored more. Like, for example, they had that Darius Slayton 65-yard play that was negated by illegal formation. By
the way, that's a penalty that players should be fined for. There's no excuse for just like there's no excuse for a delay of game penalty after a timeout.
Right.
There's no excuse for an illegal formation player when an illegal formation when the games or the scoring situations on the line. Was that the play, I think, when Washington had the ball, I think, on the Baltimore 1 at some point during that game last week, and there was an illegal formation that was called? No excuse for that. I can always understand holding penalties and illegal motion penalties because of the crowd noise and everything. But when you've got time to prepare and you know where you're supposed to be, you can't have two men moving at once, for example, for the illegal formation, I guess is what they would call that, or maybe illegal motion. I guess they could call it either way, or the delay of game. There's no excuse for those kind of penalties. Those are mental penalties as opposed to physical penalties.
Yeah, absolutely. You can't have that for sure. Randy asking, does Andy play or recommend teasers to teams?
Yes. We talked about that before. I actually do a teaser newsletter that looks into that and gives some strategies. But yeah, I think the one that's almost an automatic, as we talked about, if you can get a 6, now you got to lay more juice than you have in the past. One place in town, I think I mentioned it, -140 on 2-team 6-point teasers. That's because they get a lot of sharp action and a lot of big action. Most places are -120. 15 years ago, it was almost even money and -110 on the 6.5s and -120 on the 7s. So now it's -120 on the 6s. But yeah, if you can get the best ones I like in the NFL, especially because the difference between the best teams in the NFL and the worst teams in the NFL in terms of talent are not really that great. Often it's management, often its coaching in schemes, etc. But it's a much more narrow universe in the NFL between top and bottom than, for example, in college football. So if you can tease over 2.5 to 2.5 up to 8.5, and you put the numbers 3, 4, 6, 7, and 8 in play, those are the best. And as I say, again, it's going to be a competitive matchup simply because the line is 2.5, whether it be the road team favored by 2.5, which is arguably the better team, or the home team favored by 2.5, which almost suggests on a neutral field it's a pick'em game.
Yeah, I
2.5 to 8.5 is powerful.
Right. Yeah, you have to get those key numbers. 3, 7, and 6 are the 3 most likely results of any NFL game. Obviously, if you're getting the 7, you're getting the 6, but still, it's still you have to get those. Cam McNeil says the Raiders have beaten the Chargers 5 out of last 6. How'd that work out? You're betting on Watson. You're betting on the whole team. I don't think you can look at one player You bet on Watson last week, and he covered the spread against the Eagles.
I don't know. Was it the Raiders that beaten the Chargers, or was it the Broncos that I know they owned the Broncos. I was not aware of their success against the Chargers recently.
Yeah, the Raiders had beaten the Broncos 8 in a row, and they got blown out.
Yeah.
But they had so many injuries in that game. You have to look at it a case by case basis.
I was going to save it for the Raiders and the Rams game. Raiders also had the distractions with for the last few weeks with Devontae Adams and all that, and and the quarterback switch, etc. They had a lot of locker room issues. Let's call it that.
Yeah. Absolutely. And you mentioned you had a newsletter. How do people subscribe to that? Is that through your site?
Oh, they can go, www, the logical approach. In fact, it's a theological approach without that second O in there. So you do have to do some praying something, with theology, but I left the O out of there. So it's the logical approach. And you can actually take a look at a sample from last year. I will say that some of the selections that we have right now, it's not been a great start to the year, but that's not unusual. Usually when things get a little bit more formful, we've had a lot of very low lines this year compared to last year. One of the things that I downgrade teams for is I do not like teasing over 0. So I like a 2. Now -2.5 to +3.5, maybe the one situation I would consider it, but I don't like teasing across 0 because basically you're giving up. A 6-point teaser becomes a 5-point teaser because in the rare situation games don't land on 0, which is one of the numbers that you get if you're teasing across 0.
Yeah, definitely don't want to do that. And Matthias said this is the worst version of Brown's team that Burrow has played in Cleveland.
It's also one of the worst versions of the Cincinnati defense Cleveland will be facing against.
This is the worst Cincinnati defense that Burrow's had. Yeah. And the offensive line hasn't been fixed. The only thing the Bengals do well is throw the ball to Chase and Higgins. They don't do anything else well. They can't stop the run. They can't stop the pass. They can get to the quarterback on the edge.
That's balance.
The Browns have their tackles, and they can't run the ball. This team is just a disaster. So they should not be 6-point favorites. But check out thelogicalapproach.com. We'll talk about that at the end as well. But you can get the newsletter for that, for the teasers. So, all right. The next game is Texans at the Packers. I don't have a strong opinion on this one, although I saw the injury report and it had a bunch of starters for Houston missing 2 practices this week. Azeez Al-Shaair, Foley Fatukasi, Kamari Lassiter, Jimmy Ward, Henry Tuo. These are not household names, but they are quality players on that defense. So I think I would definitely lean Green Bay if all those guys are out. I do like the Packers anyway. I think they're an underrated team. They struggled a bit after Jordan Love returned from injury, but he returned early. And I thought that last week was it was the timeline that he was originally supposed to return, and he had his best game. So I think that's going to continue, but still not a strong opinion here. Do you like either side in this game?
Yeah, I do like Green Bay in this spot. This Houston defense, while it's good, is not at the level that we saw it play over the latter part of last year. It's still pretty good. They both played Minnesota. Now, interestingly enough, the raw stats were fairly even when Houston and Minnesota played. Final score was 34-7. Minnesota really made the key plays in that game. Green Bay also played Minnesota, and they were down, I think, 28-0 at halftime in that game. Or something along those lines, and they came back, or maybe 20. I think they ended up losing that game like 31-29 or something like that. So even though they were out of that game, I think it was 17-0 in the second quarter. I think Minnesota was up. I like the fact that Green Bay came back. Now Jordan Love did play that game. I think that was his first game after missing the injuries. And I like what I've seen out of Green Bay. They run the ball very well. They run it very often, but they're very effective at running the ball. So I think they can have some success against Houston. And the Green Bay defense has played decently as well. That was not expected to be a strength, but it certainly wasn't expected to be a weakness either, and it hasn't been. Laying 3 with Green Bay, or even 2.5 if you can get it, is something that I will be on if the line. I'm trying to remember. Is it have there any 3.5s out there yet? On that one,
I don't.
Let me see.
So. I'm not.
No, I'm seeing 2.5s and 3 evens on that. So yeah. So I'm gonna. That's another one I'm gonna be playing tomorrow. I'll be on Green Bay.
Okay. Green Bay 6th in defensive EPA. So very impressive. They've been so bad against the run over the years.
Where's Houston? Where's Houston on that?
Houston in defensive EPA is let's see, they're 11th.
Yeah, I was going to say about ninth, but yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah, so Houston's 17th actually in offense, whereas the difference here is Green Bay's 11th and 6th in defense. So they definitely look like the better team. Yeah, Green Bay has his receivers, as Cam McNeil says. Although Dontavian Wicks got hurt, but he's the fourth option, so not really. Let's see here. The next one is Dolphins at the Colts. This was a plus 3.5. It went to 3. I assume because Jonathan Taylor has not practiced yet this week, whereas Devon Achane has been fully in practice. So I would suspect he's going to return off the concussion. Anthony Richardson has also been practicing fully, but I'm not sure what sort of advantage that is. My rule for backup quarterbacks here, and we have Tyler Huntley starting with the Dolphins, is that you play them against mediocre or bad defenses. You fade them against great defenses, and the Colts obviously do not have a great defense. They have so many injuries on this side of the ball. I like the Dolphins here. I think they can move the ball in the Colts. And I'm not sure that the Colts without Jonathan Taylor, their offense is not great, especially if Richardson returns and is not 100%. I think the Dolphins are the play here. Who do you like in this game?
Yeah, I'm not crazy about Indianapolis right now. I was on Tennessee last week. I thought Pittman was not going to play. And he was banged up for much of the week, and then he goes out there and he catches, I think, the touchdown that gave him the lead at the end of the game. I wonder, where was he listed on the report? Was he listed as doubtful or questionable?
He was listed as questionable. So they listed it as a multi-week injury, and he so what stood out to me was he was DNP, and then full in practice last week. Which is bizarre. I've never seen that. Well, at least not with a player who was diagnosed as a multi-week injury. So that's crazy. Yeah.
Yeah, I have nothing on this game. I might lean to Indianapolis only because I think both Richardson and Flacco are more capable than Huntley, and more capable, certainly Richardson, of making the big play. Now, Richardson might be also more susceptible to making the big mistake as well, but we don't know about Taylor. We'll see what happens on the Friday injury report. But with the line down to 3, I'd be more inclined to look at Indianapolis. But again, one of the advantages that we have as bettors, the big advantage the books have is the 11-10. The advantage the bettors have is that if you don't really have a comfortable feeling about a game, you can pass. This is one of those games I don't have that feeling about. Feeling.
All right, fair enough. All right, next game is the Lions at the Vikings. Vikings are they were minus 1.5 here. Actually, I don't know if that line moved at all. It's still minus 1.5. I don't really have a good feel for this game. Aiden Hutchinson being lost for the year is just such a big blow for the Lions. And Minnesota's offensive line is so great that you needed someone like Hutchinson to break through, I think. And without him and getting all this pressure, that's just a big advantage for Minnesota. And Minnesota does play on Thursday night. So if this were a non-divisional game, I'd say they maybe look ahead. But this is their big game. So I don't see that happening. Nothing on the injury report either is a surprise. Blake Cashman's not going to play for Minnesota. He's been a great linebacker, but we already knew that. They said that he was unlikely to play. So I don't know where to go with this game outside of perhaps teasing up the Lions to 7.5. That's the only thing I see here, unless I'm missing something. Do you like anyone in this game?
No, it's one of those games where you can make a case for either teams. There are more positives for both teams other than negatives for both teams. So you can make a case for Detroit as well as they're playing. I'll be interested to see in the contests, the Westgate and the Circa, what the split is on this game, because I would think it could be very, very close. A lot of people like Minnesota the way they've played. Kirk Cousins is certainly is missed, but Sam Darnold has filled in capably. And they're unbeaten, but they're also off a bye week, which is a positive as well. On the other hand, everyone saw Detroit and what they did down at Dallas, last week, and this is a hot team, and they are going to miss Hutchinson, and I think they are. I thought I heard that they were looking to possibly do something with the Jets for Reddick to get a long-term replacement, because it looks as though Hutchinson, they say he might be back for the playoffs, but I would doubt that so much. because of the injury and how long it takes to heal, and then you want to make sure that it stays healed. So I think the Lions have to find something to strengthen that up. These teams have played, I think it's 5 straight overs in this series. Now, of course, that was without Flores leading the defense for Minnesota, but I think Detroit still has enough firepower on offense to put 24 points up on the board against Minnesota. And at the same time, the absence of Hutchinson should be felt. And I think Minnesota can put some points up as well. I think this will be an entertaining game. I know Detroit likes to control clock. They may not be able to do that against Minnesota, especially if they fall behind. So my first play in the game would be over. My second play, I would agree with teasing Detroit up. There are a couple of games. There's another game that I like playing between two competitive teams more than this one, because I think there's some better edges in the other game.
Okay, all right. Let's get to the last of the early games. We have Eagles at the Giants. Some major injuries in this game. So I guess people know about Jordan Mailata, who got hurt last game, and also Dallas Goedert. Grant Calcaterra was a pretty solid replacement there. And I don't think the Goddard injury doesn't bother me too much because they have A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith back. The Mailata injury would be a huge factor here, except that the Giants may not have Brian Burns. He missed practice both days so far. Also, Dexter Lawrence. So you have 2 dynamic players in the front 7 who may not play this game. Conversely, Malik Neighbors returned to a full practice today, so you gotta think that he's going to be back from his concussion. So that at least works out. I don't think there's much room for error here in this game, just because at +3, you kind of need to consider the Giants having a good chance to win this game. And the Giants just seem like a loser franchise. They find ways to lose. Like, for example, that Sunday night game against the Bengals, they outgained the Bengals and they found a way to lose. I think that might happen here as well. I don't want to lay 3 on the road with the Eagles either. I think Jalen Hurts in his career as a road favorite is 7-15 against the spread. So just absolutely brutal. So, and the Eagles defense is not playing well either. So I'm leaning Giants +3, but I'm not going to bet this game. Are you going to bet this game?
Not sure yet. I'm seeing 3s and 3.5s out there. So if you like the Giants, you can get 3.5. If you like the Eagles, you can lay 3, maybe with a little bit of juice. You hold Cincinnati to 17 points. You should win that game and win that game by at least a touchdown. So that tells you what you need to know about the Giants. As I mentioned, the game was basically statistically even as far as yardage goes in that game, although the Giants were able to gain, as I think I said, 5.9 is what Cincinnati allowed in that game. The thing with Philadelphia that makes me like them in this spot, number one, it's a divisional game. It's a road game, but, what's it, a 90-minute bus ride if they do that. So it's not, they're not even going to New York. They're going to New Jersey. They don't even have to cross the bridges and deal with, New York City traffic to get to wherever they're going. So that's a little bit easier than if you're going to visit, if you're driving from Philadelphia to visit your cousins on Long Island or Westchester. So, it's an easy trip. And Eagle fans travel well to that extent. Of course, Giant fans are also very loyal as well, and they'll attend the games, and may not be as many tickets available. But the other thing is, you talk about the Philadelphia receivers. Last week they were finally on the field, together, and maybe there's a little rust there. So maybe we'll see a little bit more of improvement in the passing game this week. And you did mention those key injuries on the defense, especially Burns, especially against the mobile quarterback. So I'd feel more comfortable laying the 3. I am a little bit concerned about the Philadelphia defense. It played decently against Cleveland. But again, Cincinnati only scored 17 points against that team, and Cincinnati had been scoring against a lot of teams, and I just think Philadelphia is in a good spot, and they're finding a foe that I think the line's a little short. I mean, if this, let's say that the home field advantage in the NFL, they usually use 3, but I use 2 now. Okay, it's more like between 1.7 2.3. Let's use 2. So you're basically saying Philadelphia 3, 5 on a neutral field, 7 at home, maybe 7.5 at home. Maybe you feel a little bit more comfortable taking 7.5 with the Giants, but really, when you take a look at the rosters between the teams and you factor in the injuries, is 7.5 really all that comfortable? Even in Philadelphia, again, it's a road game, not a huge road game, but because of travel. I think 3 is a pretty cheap number. The Giants have not shown me anything that suggests they're ready to trade points with Philadelphia. And Philadelphia may have an ability to put some points on the board with those 2 receivers now healthy.
Yeah, like I said, not much room for error here. If this were the advanced spread was 4, so I'd feel even better about that. But 3, I just can't. I just can't take it. All right, let's go to the late games. We have Raiders and Rams. I asked this to Evan, and we both agreed. The line movement on this game, based on the Devontae Adams news, made no sense because the Rams were -5.5, and as soon as
there wasn't much movement.
Well, it went to 7. It was -5. It was Rams were -5.5, and then it went to 7.
The initial move I thought went, but I thought it went to 6 and stayed there a while. It wasn't like 15 minutes or an hour later it went to 6.5. It stayed at 6 for a while, and then I think later on, what was it? Later on Tuesday, I think it started to creep up to 6.5, and I think a lot of that may have done with the possibility that Kupp is, I guess, more questionable than more probable than questionable, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, maybe the online books are different. I saw, as soon as the news broke, I saw the line go from 5.5 to 7, and I was like, this doesn't make any sense because Adams probably wasn't going to play anyway. But then it got bet down to 6.5. So looks like sharp money on the Raiders, I suppose. But unfortunately for the Raiders, Max Crosby and Dylan Parham both missed practice Wednesday and Thursday. Now, we've seen this routine from them before. They both missed practice last week as well. They both ended up playing. So albeit probably Crosby not 100%, but I don't know. We'll see. Cooper Kupp limited in practice twice. I suspect he'll be back, but I guess you never know, and he may not be 100%. So I wouldn't quite bank on him.
As of today, I just checked. He has been upgraded to questionable.
Yeah,
with the ankle injury.
Right. I assume he's going to.
I guess you get upgraded from doubtful to questionable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I assume he's going to play.
That's
but again, I just don't know if they're going to be 100%. So that's my question here. I just don't think a team like the Rams should be favored by 6.5 or 7 over anyone. So you mentioned earlier they have a good offense, which is absolutely true, but their defense is horrendous. They can't tackle.
Yeah.
They can't rush the passer. They can't stop the pass. Can't stop the run. They can't do anything. Feels like the Raiders should be able to move the ball. I think Brock Bowers is going to have an amazing game. The Rams are awful against tight ends. And I think that a weight could be lifted off the Raiders' shoulders here, knowing that the Devontae Adams trade drama is over. I think they could play freely. So I like the Raiders here quite a bit, actually. Do you like either side in this game?
I do like the Raiders, and you touched upon what I was thinking, that the Devontae Adams distraction. You had to wonder, the players grumbling, how serious is that hamstring injury? Are they just waiting to protect him, or not? They're not concerned about the player so much as they want to get as much as they can, and they don't want to risk him playing if he risk injury where they might be not to get as much back as they would if he just sits out those games. But I don't know that there was really how serious that injury was, other than maybe for a week or so, that maybe he could have played the last couple of weeks, and it might, I don't know, it might have made a difference against Denver, but it might have made a difference in a couple of the other games. But I think that again, that's a negative. I'm going to compare that, for example, to the Jets Buffalo game, when a lot of people were on the Jets, and a lot of them mentioned the fact that, when you change coaches, the players usually rally. But Saleh was a popular coach amongst the players. It caught him by surprise, so I didn't think it applied there. It's on. I'll use the same thing, with the disgruntled player. Adams, I think a lot of players, didn't like the fact, here's a guy who get healthy as quickly as possible. We're looking to make the playoffs. You're our best player on offense. You should be out there and shouldn't be thinking about being traded to somewhere else. Crosby, he played through an injury the other week when he could have sat out, and actually had, I think, 3 tackles and 2 sacks in the game 2 weeks ago. But when you compare this difference to last year, when the Raiders made the in-season coaching change, they got rid of an unpopular coach in Josh McDaniels. And Antonio Pierce come in, and they played very well over the latter part of the season. With the Jets, now I think it'll take a little bit different. But not only that, the strength of the Jets was the strength of the head coach. Defense, Saleh had defense. His defensive abilities at coordinator in San Francisco got him the job. And so what do the Jets do in Jets typical fashion? They say, okay, we got to name an interim coach. let's name the defensive coordinator who's been working with this great defense. Let's now spread out his responsibilities a little bit more. And yeah, we'll take away the play calling from your offensive coordinator. I just don't understand the Jets. They now I was going to compare them. They are the AFC's dysfunctional franchise, comparable to what the Arizona Cardinals were for many years in the NFC, when they were just a horribly run organization. I'm starting to think that you can almost say that about the Giants right now as well. But the difference with that changing of coach sometimes makes a difference, and I think it affects also. And maybe again, if the players were not all that upset to see Beckham go in Cleveland, maybe that affects them as well. So I do expect a better effort out of the Raiders this week. I'll be looking for a +7 to play them. Even at 6.5, I'm likely to use them in one of the one or both of the contests this week, because I do think it's a good spot. But I would be concerned if let's say Kupp doesn't even show up on the Friday night injury report, and he's going to be playing.
Right. Okay. Yeah. I remember the Cardinals used to have metal bleachers in their open stadium, which is like, how do people even go to the games at that point?
I remember that in Foxborough, but that was 40 years ago.
Right. Well, at least they had like a northern climate, whereas in Arizona you're like 110 degrees in the sun. You're sitting on the metallic bleachers.
You're stuck frozen. Well, in the East you're not frozen on it, but you're basically stuck on it with all the sweat and everything in 110 degree heat.
Exactly. Yeah. No, it's a great point you made about how the Jets liked Saleh, and a big difference with firing other coaches who are disliked.
Especially when no one thought his job was on the line.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, it's a great point. Sue saying
now they've had a chance to at least process the information, and you add Adams to the. By the way, what's with Aaron Rodgers throwing Mike Williams under the bus publicly?
I don't know. Maybe he's frustrated. He did run the wrong route. I don't know.
But you take him aside and you do it. You don't come out in a press conference and do that. And maybe that. I'm sure it's out of frustration. But I also have to wonder how the players responded to having one of their teammates, even though it was deserved, have it not done privately within the locker room. That could upset that. I don't know how well Adams and Rodgers will play this week in the first game or so. Remember, the last time Rodgers threw a pass to Adams was several years ago, when Rodgers was much younger and much quicker with his mechanics.
Yeah, it's been a while. Sue says Raiders 6 players DNP today. They're starting to look like the Saints. I think the difference here is like Crosby was DNP, but he played last week. So was Parham. He played. Like, these guys are playing at least. But if they all rolled out, then yes.
Sometimes we make too much out of DNP because you think DNP is related necessarily to a lingering or unknown injury, as opposed to he knows what he's doing. He doesn't have to go through practices. We know he's nursing an injury. We don't need to risk it. He'll be ready on game day, and Crosby has shown that he can be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Crosby.
And he's not the only one who does that. A lot of veteran players sit out practice as they, Crosby's a lot younger than maybe a lot of those veteran players, or at least somewhat younger than those players. But a lot of those players who are in their mid to late 30s often get the benefit of additional time not to practice. They're ready on game day.
Yeah. Yeah, it's Crosby's definitely a gamer. I'd be surprised if he misses this game, especially.
I don't put as much on DNP as a lot of people do.
Yeah, especially early in the week. All right. Anyway, so the next game, Carolina, Washington. My stuff for this game is Deontay Johnson. We're talking about DNPs. Deontay Johnson, Taylor Moton, and Josie Jewell were all three of them were DNPs twice so far this week. I got a text today from someone saying that they're hearing Deontay Johnson is going to be traded. This is not a source of mine. This is not a source of Charlie's. I don't even say like I completely trust this, but it just caught me off guard. So just keep that in mind. But I don't know if that's going to happen. But anyway, just wanted to share that with you guys. So if all three of these guys are out, then I don't really. I'd probably be on Washington at that point. But as it stands now, I don't have a good feel for this game. I think Washington put a lot into that Baltimore game, and now they're big favorites. This is a situation we saw a couple times this year where Cincinnati put everything into that Kansas City game in week 2, and then they were big favorites in week 3, and they lost outright. It happened to Seattle. Seattle played their hearts out against Detroit Monday night, then they're big favorites against the Giants. They lost outright. This is the same sort of situation. However, Carolina is just an awful team. They have no defense. They are dead last in pressure rate. This is a stat I loved. I shared it earlier in the week. Carolina is dead last in pressure rate, but they are 5th in blitz rate, which means they're sending extra pass rushers at a top 5 rate in the NFL, and yet they're not getting to the quarterback at all. So like they might as well just drop everyone back and not even try at that point. So I can't bet on Carolina anymore. But this line is so high for a team coming off a heartbreaking loss. I'm still going to be in Washington. Do you have any feel for this game?
I don't know. There was a heartbreaking loss. They were 7-point underdogs in the game, and they were competitive throughout that game. And they had won 4 in a row. They're 4-1. They certainly have shown progress. And the quarterback didn't have a bad game against Baltimore. Of course, a lot of quarterbacks haven't this year against a team that's not been. We talked about it before. Baltimore is not the same. Their defense used to be like 3rd against the rush, 8th against the pass. I think this year. They're like, no, I know they're number 1 against the rush, but they're like number 28 or 30 against the pass. It's very unbalanced, and that could be a problem. I don't know that Dalton and Carolina can take advantage of that, but looking at this game, I think don't know that I want to lay the points with Washington, but we talked about teasing those other teams up from +2.5 to +8. Maybe we tease Washington down to under a field goal and maybe even under 2.
Yeah, I like that idea. I think Washington is definitely one of the legs in the teaser. Yeah, the question is, who is the other leg? Is it? I think we're looking at Detroit, for example,
or Seattle,
Seattle and Detroit were the other candidates, and there are some other candidates in the night games as well. So you can go a variety of ways. All right, so let's move on to the next game, which is the big game on the slate, the Chiefs at the 49ers. You have Andy Reid coming off a bye, which has historically been great, but the past 3 years, not so much. But the 49ers are coming off extra rest as well. So the only injury note I have here is that the Niners, both of their kickers were DNPs and Wednesday and Thursday, so they might have a 3rd-string kicker, but I'm not going to really factor that in. I'm leaning toward the 49ers here. I like the schematic matchups here where look at how these teams are weak in what areas. So the Chiefs are weak against tight ends and receiver 2s, and the Niners have 2 number 1 receivers, and they obviously have George Kittle. So I think George Kittle could have a monster game against the 49ers. And look at where the 49ers are weak. They're also weak against receiver 2s, and they are weak against running backs as receivers out of the backfield. I don't trust Kareem Hunt to beat the Niners. I don't trust who's the receiver 2 on the Chiefs. Is it Justin Watson? I don't trust Justin Watson to beat the Niners either. So I think this is it's a good matchup for the Niners. However, if you take the Niners, that means you're betting on Mahomes to lose outright, and I don't want to do that. So I'm passing on this game. I'm just gonna sit back and watch it and have a good time. Are you gonna bet this one?
Probably, and it'll be on Kansas City. First of all, I don't think the Super Bowl revenge means anything because even if they win, they still lost the Super Bowl. But not only that, they've been in revenge already for the previous Super Bowl loss. They met 2 seasons later, and I think Kansas City won by like 20 points in that game when they met, I think, in 2022. 44-23, I think
that was Christian McCaffrey's first game with the Niners.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. McCaffrey's not playing this week for the 49ers. The backup, I think, is banged up as well. Andy Reid, you mentioned him about the Kansas City against San Francisco has not been able to hold leads. We've seen that multiple times now. I think Kansas City overall has won 4 straight against the 49ers. They don't play often in the regular season, but they played those 2 Super Bowls recently. Otherwise, they meet once every 4 years. And I think so. Andy Reid, I think, has been in 5 games against the 49ers since coming over to Kansas City about a decade ago. But forget about Andy Reid off the bye. Just Andy Reid against Kyle Shanahan. I'm sure we haven't forgotten it about Shanahan's ability with New England, with Atlanta in that Super Bowl against New England, and it just seems to repeat in some of these big games. And you pointed out, I prefer Mahomes over Purdy. I prefer the Kansas City defense under Spagnuolo. against the San Francisco defense. Um, if I bet against Kansas City and Kansas City wins, I'll say, why did I go against Kansas City? We got Mahomes. On the other hand, if I bet on Kansas City and San Francisco wins, I'd say, well, they're a good team. They were due to win sometime. I'm not surprised. So, in other words, if I'm betting on the team that has shown an ability to beat a constant opponent and they lose, okay, it happens. But if I bet against the team that's shown that domination and it's a competitively priced game and they win and I'm not on them, I'd say, why? It's kind of like, why are you trying to pick when a streak will end? Whether it be in almost any sport. A team wins and they have that confidence level and they know they can do certain things, whether it be baseball, football, basketball. I don't mind betting that a streak will end here, but or that it will continue here. But that can't be the reason why I'm betting it. It's a factor. It's a fact that applies, but it may not be the reason that I'm betting. It's not the reason here. The fact that Kansas City has beaten them all this time, other than they have had success, and they have had success in ways when they, what happens if Kansas City gets a nice lead early on San Francisco? Can we see San Francisco coming back? I'm not so sure because I don't think they've really been in that situation very often. So for me, it's Kansas City or pass, and I'm likely to be on Kansas City. If you want to tease San Francisco up over 7, I feel the same way of teasing San Francisco. Well, I feel better about teasing Detroit up to over 7 than I do teasing San Francisco against Kansas City because of the I think there's a greater possibility that Kansas City can create distance on San Francisco than Minnesota can create distance on Detroit, even though I do think both are possible.
Okay. Makes sense.
And the reason, by the way, the reason I say that about Minnesota against Detroit, Kansas City has not been an offensive juggernaut this year, much like last year. Last year was their defense. The offense is better this year, although they are suffering injuries. But I just don't. I just have not seen them really have that breakout game yet.
Yeah.
And I don't think it comes here.
Yeah.
But they only have to win by 2.
Right. You're right. Yeah, I don't think so either. All right. Anyway, let's go to the Sunday night game. We talked about the Jets already. We had Jets at the Steelers. So I was neutral on this game. Evan talked me into betting the Jets. So kind of curious about what you think. But injury-wise, we have the Jets might be down 2 cornerbacks, Michael Carter and DJ Reed were both DNP Wednesday and Thursday. But against the Steelers receiving core, it may not matter. I think the bigger injury is Zach Frazier, a Steelers center, DNP, in 2 days. And if he's out, that means the Steelers are going to be down 3 offensive linemen against this Jets front, which just sounds like a nightmare. So my thought was, the Jets coming off that loss on national TV, they're 2-4. It's a must-win game. I like them here against the Steelers, who, I don't think the Steelers are that good. They got outgained by 200 yards against Dallas a couple weeks ago on prime time. So the Jets are much better than Dallas, as we know now. So I think the Jets are the right side. I was just concerned about, Devontae Adams being traded there, it being a distraction. But Evan made some great points on Tuesday. He kind of talked me into betting the Jets. So what do you think about this one?
No, I like Pittsburgh in this spot. I trust Tomlin over an interim coach. I also like the fact that apparently Russell Wilson is going to start, and I like it not necessarily for this game, but going forward. You've got 2. I won't say either of them. Well, certainly we don't know with Fields yet, but certainly Russell Wilson. I don't know that he's a Hall of Fame quarterback. He's accomplished a lot, but he's certainly in that second tier of, maybe under consideration at some point. We don't know about Fields, although he has shown progression. And I think it was a class thing. I think he was being a team player when he came out with that comment, what was it, last night or today, where I don't think I played good enough, to not be concerned about, to automatically be the starter. I think he didn't want to upset the chemistry on that team, and he accepted partial responsibility. I don't think, they're 4-2, and I don't know that they would have been that much better if that good at all with Russell Wilson in there. But what it does set them up to do, and whether Tomlin is thinking about it, whether he'd consider it, it gives him the opportunity with 2 accomplished quarterbacks to have 2 separate game plans and use one quarterback in the first half, one quarterback in the second half, and you've got opponents preparing for two different quarterbacks, but they're only spending 50% of the time in preparation than 100% of the time in preparation. And Tomlin can do it either. Let's do it one half. Let's do it drive by drive so that the defense is off balance. The coaches have to be off balance. Oh, now all of a sudden we have to pass. We have to think about how we want to defend Russell Wilson after defending Justin Fields on the last drive. There's not many teams that have the luxury of two comparable quarterbacks that have been successful in being able to show that they can win games. Of course, the database on Justin Fields is still very limited, but he has shown progress, and the Steelers made the investment in him. So, despite already having Russell Wilson, so I think that's a potential thing down the road. I want to see if other people pick up on that and what their thoughts are on that. If that is a possibility, it's kind of like in baseball where you're seeing all these pitchers now, starting pitchers going, 3 innings, and bullpens come in. You take advantage of the fact that you're in the ideal. And just as an aside on baseball, the best thing I would like to see a team do, and we sort of see it a little bit, is you have pitchers come in, they go through the lineup once, 1 through 9, a left-hander. Then you bring in a right-hander to go 1 through 9. Then you bring in a left-hander so that a hitter never sees a right-handed pitcher twice in succession, and he never sees the same pitcher twice in succession. And I think that's the kind of thinking that can go. It's a little bit over, beyond the envelope and over the edge, but I think it does add some strategic advantages when you're keeping the other team off balance more than usual. As far as this game goes, I think Pittsburgh will also be motivated because of what you mentioned. They were outgained by Dallas, but they had that game won, and it was the strength of the team, the defense, that allowed a 4.5-minute, 14-play drive to beat them that Sunday night 2 weeks ago against Dallas. So I think Pittsburgh will be very focused for this game. Again, I wonder about the chemistry, how quickly it'll develop between Rodgers and Adams. And I have to wonder about the other receivers in the room who are going to lose playing time now that, the third teammate of Rodgers? You have Cobb, you have Lazard, and now you got Adams. What is that going to do with Williams and Wilson? They've got to be thinking a little bit about that. And the Jets still have to show that they can run the ball. Now, Adams should enable them to be able to do more running with the passing game developing, but I'm not sure it'll do this. I'm not sure that it will happen this week.
Yeah, I do worry about the chemistry and the distraction. Although with Russell Wilson, we have a couple of comments here. Regardless of spread or opponent, I would think bet against Russell Wilson would be automatic for Walter football. Yeah, Russell Wilson has lost at least a third of his games since he can no longer run like he used to. Yeah, I used to love Russell Wilson, but he's certainly declined. Do you think this is sort of like the Jets firing Saleh, where like the Steelers? I feel like Justin Fields was genuinely liked, and he was winning. It's not like he was losing. They're 4-2. Yeah. Do you think that like maybe the team is like, oh, why are we doing this? Do you think they could be a little disgruntled here?
I have to believe that Mike Tomlin has some sort of plan, and I think what he wants to do, and I can understand it. We may disagree. I know you certainly will disagree. I'm not so sure, but I know you will disagree. Mike Tomlin is probably telling his team, we have a team that can make the playoffs this year. We want to be prepared if we make the playoffs and Fields gets injured, that Russell Wilson has enough playing time to prove that he can do it. We don't think this is nothing against Justin Fields. We want to give Wilson 4 or 5 games, and then maybe we'll consider using them both. Maybe then we want to make sure that we've got 2 capable quarterbacks that if one gets injured, because we've got such a capable quarterback, we, unlike most other teams, will be able to overcome the loss of a starting quarterback to injury. Look what it did to Cincinnati last year. Look what it did to Minnesota last year. They did not have the kind of backups that we have here in Pittsburgh, whether it be Wilson, Fields, or Fields, Wilson. I have to believe that, and I have no reason to believe it, I haven't been told anything, but I have to think that had to go into Tomlin's, his thinking, and number 2, his conveying it to the team, so that the team is aware. Because, yeah, I could understand, Coach, we're 4-2 with him. He gives us a great ability with his legs and everything. Russell Wilson's old. He may not have that same ability. We've seen it when, up in Seattle and Denver. And then Denver may just have been the way, he was coached by Peyton, but that's a different story. He was already showing signs of that in Seattle. But I'm wondering if that's part of something that Tomlin had to think through, and when part of the thinking process had to be, I have to level with my team why we are making a change. It's not like we're 2-4 when we would be maybe thinking about a change. We're 4-2. That shouldn't be even in our thought process unless there's something more to it. And maybe there's something more to it is what I just discussed about looking towards the long term, because this team believes it's a playoff caliber team. I don't know that they're a Super Bowl team, but I think they know that they have a chance they believe they have a chance at the playoffs.
Yeah, Daniel Caps, in all caps.
Yeah, I'm saying that too.
Appropriate name, yeah. Is it because Fields is playing 51% of the snaps? They have to give the Bears a 4th round pick and not a 6th round pick. And that
may be part of the thinking.
Yeah, I hope not.
That would be part of the thinking. But you know what? He still has what they play. He still has 3 more games of leeway before he has a chance, I think, at the 51% of the snaps.
Yeah, and I'll say this: like Tomlin, I think has enough respect that he can get away with this. Whereas if it was a coach without any accolades, that he would be questioned heavily in the locker room. But I think Tomlin's one of the few coaches who could do this. I think, and just not.
Yeah, well, his longevity, like John Harbaugh it would be crazy to think John Harbaugh would do it at Baltimore with Jackson. But he's built up that in certain coaches we trust, and you've been along that long around. It means you've been successful to have been around long enough, and both of those coaches have. I mean, what are they both? They're both approaching 20 years.
Yeah. Brady real fast. Bijan, Amari Cooper, and Brock Bowers for Deontay Johnson, Jordan Mason, Jane Daniels. Who wins this trade? Well, Deontay Johnson might have Bryce Young throwing to him soon. I don't like that. Jordan Mason's injured, so it's really 3 for 1 here. Unless you really need the quarterback, I think I'd rather have the first trio, but it's not. It's pretty close trade, I think. Jane Daniels just you have to pay a premium for him, I guess. Okay, so let's get to the next game, which is the first Monday night game. We have a doubleheader, which I always love. I love these Monday night doubleheaders. So Ravens of the Buccaneers.
I wish they would do away with the Thursday night game and give us Monday night doubleheaders, and maybe stagger the times a little bit better. Maybe you're going to inconvenience East Coast or West Coast. Why don't you sort of like inconvenience both coasts, but a little bit differently? You start the first game at 3:15, 6:15 Eastern, and then you start the West Coast game maybe at maybe like late third quarter of the first game, or whatever that would be, like maybe 2 hours and 15 minutes later.
Yeah, we said start them at 7 and 9. Monday night football games used to start at 9 o'clock. You can still do it. I think that's fine. So yeah, I definitely agree with that. I wish they would have 2 Monday night games every week, and at the cost of a Thursday night game, please. I hate these Thursday.
Well, games. You know what? Maybe those Thursday night games they certainly a reasonable thought, but remember, I still don't understand the correlation between Thursday night games and the concern for player safety. Monday night doubleheaders might do it.
Right. It's it's so hypocritical to say that you care about player safety, and it's like, oh, by the way, you guys play on 3 days rest after colliding with each other.
By the way, I'll just as an aside here, it does relate to football. It relates to Roger Goodell. There's an article in the New York Post, that may have been in other papers, that while in Europe last week, Goodell threw out the idea about playing a Super Bowl in Europe. Yes. And the article, they don't have proofreaders, because he was just teasing it, but he threw it, he just mentioned it. The article said Roger Goodell formally mentioned playing a game, formally mentioned that they would never play a game outside the U.S. But they used the word not formally, which is what it was. He formally indicated. In other words, he said, no way will we play a game outside the U.S. But they used the word formally, as in like formal wear, formal suit, formal statement or something, so that they got it wrong, and it conveyed a totally different meaning, because formally means it's kind of like official. Formally means I did it in the past, but it may not necessarily be true now. So that's just another thing. And it also explains the hypocrisy, because I remember back in the 1970s, before a lot of our audience was born, the NFL testified before Congress, we will never put the Super Bowl on pay TV. What do you think? What do you think cable TV is, folks?
Right.
You ain't getting it for free.
No.
And it'll be streaming in one. I think like Amazon will, I think, have the rights in a few years for the Super Bowl.
It's gonna be hard. I'm not looking forward to that. There are a lot of pissed off people here in Philly that they had to download Peacock to watch that.
Oh, was that for that Comcast, the Disney dispute?
Oh no! The first game, it was the Eagles.
Oh, the Peacock one in Brazil, yeah.
Yeah, you
I
needed
thought you were talking
Peacock.
about the Disney strike that kept some NFL games off the air for a week or two
Yeah, the one person I
with
know is like, oh,
ESPN. Yeah.
I was like, what channel is this on? I'm like, oh, it's on Peacock. They're like, oh, but what channel is that on Comcast? I'm like, it's not on Comcast. Yeah, you have to download Peacock. They're like, what's Peacock?
And they should have gotten used to it after not paying for the Olympics that were on Peacock. Part of them.
Yeah, so I don't know. There's so many. It's so many streaming services. That's the problem.
Yeah.
They just combine all of them into one or two. I think it'd be okay. But
And
they're like,
just imagine what it's like on Saturday. You got to have like 18 TVs to catch all the 18 networks that are telecasting college football.
oh yeah, absolutely. It's ridiculous. But anyway, let's get to this game. We have Ravens Buccaneers. You touched on this earlier. How the Ravens are number one against the run, but near the bottom against the pass. And what does Tampa like to do? They like to throw the ball to Chris Godwin, Mike Evans, Kate Otten, Sterling Shepard getting some work lately as well. So Mike Evans was DMP on Thursday, but it's early in the week, so I wouldn't. I'd be shocked if he missed this game because he got banged up last week and came back. So yeah, this is one strength that Tampa can exploit here is the passing game against Baltimore's bad pass defense. The other one is Baltimore. They run the ball better than anyone in the NFL, but the Tampa Bay's run defense is very good. They could stop with Vita Vea, so they could force Lamar Jackson into unfavorable passing downs. And so I like Tampa in this matchup here. I think this line is also too high. Baltimore has won 4 in a row, and it seems like they're such a public team right now. People are saying they're the best team in the NFL, and I don't agree. Just defensively, they are ranked. I believe their defensive EPA ranking. Let's see, it's 24th. So, like, I feel like they have too many liabilities to be considered the top team in the NFL. Maybe you could argue 5th, 6th, 7th best team in the NFL, sure. But Tampa getting plus 3.5 just seems like a great bargain. I like Tampa here. Which side do you like in this one?
Well, you know what's interesting? Baltimore does lead the league, and it's an incredible 205 yards per game. They rush often, but they rush well when they do rush. I forget exactly the numbers. It's, I think, close to 5 yards per rush or 4 point something. Tampa Bay's not bad. They're number 8, 137 yards per game, so they can actually run the ball. Unfortunately, they're going up a defense that's not only ranked number 1 against the rush, they're allowing only 59 yards per game is Baltimore, but that's because teams have also, either by design or by necessity against that defense, they're passing for 276 against that Baltimore defense, which is now 31 against the pass. Not that Tampa Bay is much better. It's 20-something yards less. It's number 28, and they have a decent passing game. But Tampa Bay also can run the ball. They're averaging 137 yards on the ground. That's number 8 in the league. So it's not as though they can't have some success running the football. In fact, I'd like to see what the proposition is for Tampa Bay rushing yards in that game. Baltimore allows 59. I wonder if they might not put up something like 65.5 or something. Will Tampa Bay go over or under, meaning that they'll slightly exceed the ridiculous number that Tampa Bay is holding opponents to, keeping in mind that the 205 yards that Baltimore rushes means they're rushing a lot, taking a lot of time off the clock. Having said that, because of the defensive issues with both teams' pass defenses, I can see this being a higher than expected scoring game. But I, too, like Tampa Bay plus the points in this game. I would not be surprised by the outright upset. Tampa Bay has been a very surprising team this year, and I think a large of it has to do with just how comfortable Mayfield has looked in most of his games. And again, he's not going up the Baltimore defense pass-wise of the last few years. So I think it's a good spot for Tampa Bay. This team, rightfully so, is now thinking, hey, it's going to be us in Atlanta for the division title.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Glad
and maybe possibly a wild card when we were talking back, 8 and 9 might win the division. 10 teams might win this division now. 10 wins might get to the division title here now.
Yeah, it looks like a 2-horse race. Saints falling apart, Panthers being terrible. I
believe both the Saints and the Bucs still have to play the Raiders.
Yeah, I bet the Saints to finish last place in the division, 4-1. So hoping that Carolina beats them in the rematch, but we'll see. Anyway, our final game here is the Chargers versus the Cardinals. This Cardinal team is so topsy-turvy. Like they get blown out one game, they come back, they play very well. Like they beat San Francisco, they come back and get blown out by Green Bay. This is sort of roller coaster ride we've seen from Kyler Murray. It just makes you think back to like a couple of years ago when the Cardinals were an upstart. They blew out Tennessee as small favorites, or they may have been underdogs in week 1, and then they play a bad Minnesota team in week 2, and they almost lose as 6-point favorites. Like this is like when Kyler Murray loses or gets blown out, he tends to play much better the next week, and vice versa. If he wins or wins as an underdog or blows out the opponent, they tend to struggle in the next game. So that tells me Arizona is going to play better in this game. The problem is like the Chargers, I feel like are so well coached.
Where are they DVOA on defense? They got to be pretty high.
The Chargers are they are, let's see, where are they? They're 16th in EPA.
Oh, that's okay. That's surprising considering some of the numbers they are putting up.
You know what?
But they use
different what's
formula.
factored into that is the comeback Denver had last week. So I think if you adjust that to remove 90 or 10% win probabilities for the opponent, then it would be a lot better. Which I'll do while you're talking.
Part of the reason I say that is, well, I was just going to say, part of the reason is the Chargers are actually being outgained on the season. Okay, they gain 281 yards per game. That's number 28. They allow 289 yards per game, which is 6th, okay, using that metric. But 13.2 points per game allowed, that's number 1. Part of the reason is they've only lost 2 turnovers all season. Now, yeah, they played one less game, but that's protection. They also run the football. 128, that's number 10 in the league. They're pretty good, under 100 yards allowed defensively against the run, and their passing numbers, it's hard to believe. Justin Herbert and the offense, 154 yards per game through the air. That's 29th. But they're also allowing under 200 yards per game through the air, which is number 8. So overall, when I look at this game, and that's Harbaugh again, trying to make this a physical game, which they're able to. The defense is very solid. They don't mind running the football. If they can get some pressure, and we don't know, Bosa is such an important part of that Charger defense, yet they've still been able to play well defensively without him. I kind of like the Chargers in this game. I kind of like the spot for the Cardinals. So maybe what I do is, because the Chargers can play at a slow pace with their ability to run the ball, and the offensive line doing a good job, I may look under the total in this one. It's a reasonable total. I think it's 41.
Yeah, it was higher than that. I think it's 44. The totals. So I guess.
Okay, yeah. There's another game that I was thinking. Yeah, I'm seeing 43.5 up to 44 now. I'm trying to remember the other game that was under 41 that I kind of looked under that one, but let me see where that one was. That might have been the Tennessee Buffalo game.
Okay,
or the New England Jacksonville game.
So I looked at I turned on the garbage time filter for EPA, and the Chargers go up from 16th in defense to 5th. So. That's it just goes to show, if you remove those garbage time stats against Denver, I don't know if there was another. Oh, Carolina also had better success when they were down big.
I'd like to see the metrics. I don't know where do you have that information? What site? Or is that something you keep yourself?
Oh no, I can share it.
What is garbage time? How do they define garbage time? More up by more than 2 scores?
It's
depending on the place of the game.
It's 90% win probability. So
that's a nebulous number.
Yeah.
Only because how do you define probability based upon, first of all, that also depends upon the capability of a team to come back, as opposed to time and differential time and margin of the game. But I'd like to see something, the first half stats, the third quarter stats, and the fourth quarter stats. Because that way, you can provide it on a game-by-game basis. Then you can pick and choose when the stats are. It's kind of like taking out rushing attempts for teams and quarterbacks when you're doing a kneel down at the end of the first half or second half.
So this is the site. It's rbsdm.com, which I made this joke before. It sounds like a porn site, but I assure you it's not. So here it is on the screen, rbsdm.com, and on the left there are a bunch of filters, and so yeah, if you didn't want to look at the garbage time win percentage filter, you could just remove fourth quarter. So you can remove fourth quarter here, and I like to go past 4 weeks. So let's run this.
Yeah, that's what I also do. I like 4 weeks for a current because it means you're including at least one home game, and you're also including one road game for teams that may have played 3 out of 4 at home or on the road.
Yeah. So if you remove fourth quarter, the Chargers move up to second in defense.
Okay.
So even better. So yeah, it's either way you slice it, they're a lot better that if you remove garbage time or fourth quarter. So yeah, that's their defense has been phenomenal.
So people keep using these traditional stats that you see in the newspaper that make the Chargers look bad, whereas the more advanced stats when you take it out, or even just use the DVOA that shows them at 16 when they're really not the 16th worst defense.
Right. Yeah, it's definitely important to look at this. So yeah,
that'll give us who use these who break it down like Walter, like you're doing now, an advantage because teams will not be as they appear to be. It's kind of like what I do in college football. I break the stats down I show the overall stats, all of a team's games, but then I also show the same stats taking out games against the East Tennessee States and the other FCS teams that are included in the team schedule, which in the first few weeks of the year, let's say through 4 games, that counts for 25% of a team's total when you're beating, East Tennessee State 47-3. As the season moves on, and those stats are still included, the weight that those stats have as far as the overall numbers goes down. But still, even after 10 games, it's still 10% of the team's performance.
Yeah, it's absolutely true.
That could be significant when you're talking about a team that averages 400 yards per game in college. Take out 10%, that's 360 against the other 9 teams, when in fact maybe it's more than the 400 that were in that game. Maybe they scored 600 or gained 600 yards in that 47-3 win, and that's factored into the full season totals that average 400.
Yeah, it's important to remove stuff like that. Absolutely. Sue says this is by far the most challenged offense the Cardinals have faced all year. Chargers not close to Bills, Rams, Lions, Redskins, 49ers, and Packers. Give me the Cardinals and the points. Yeah, that's true. But then again, the Chargers are very well coached. I would say that. And then defensively, this is the best team the Cardinals have played. So I think their offense, that Arizona's offense, could be challenged. I think this is a tough game to handicap. I don't anticipate betting this one. I don't even know if I'm going to tease it.
Yeah, I don't know. I might consider that as a possible tease, but it's kind of like, again, if I tease up Arizona, Detroit, or San Francisco or Kansas City, I might put Arizona in the middle of those teams. I'm not quite sure. I'd probably put Kansas City ahead because it's more reliable. San Francisco.
Arizona's been blown out twice this year, so I don't necessarily.
That is a concern.
Yeah, I feel like if they fall behind, they could easily just fall apart. So
that's why I'm looking at the under in this game, because you've got a solid, a pedestrian offensive team in the Chargers, but a very, very good defensive team. Again, they lead the league in allowing just 13.2 points per game. Okay, so the defense, if the Arizona offense faces a good defense, they could have some trouble. Okay.
Yeah.
On the other hand, if the Chargers offense faces a weak defense, they could have some success. But I think that Arizona's struggle against a really good Chargers defense might outweigh the success that the Chargers could have against the Arizona defense, simply because the Chargers have by design not been a passing football team, which is where you usually make up a lot of ground, even if you're behind, or especially when you're behind.
Yeah, and Arizona's defense is so bad against the run. The Chargers love to run the ball. It just seems like a good matchup for them. But like I said, you said the spot favors Arizona, which I completely agree with. So yeah, so it's a tough one to handicap. Last question here: should I drop?
That might be, by the way, that might be in a game. Well, most of these games are, but that one especially might be an in-game play.
Yeah, I could see that for sure.
Watch the first 2 or 3 drives for each team.
Yeah. Last question: should I drop Algier for Singletary or Pickens? I would not drop Algier. Not only is he the top handcuff in fantasy, he's also getting more carries than Bijan Robinson right now because Bijan's banged up. So I would definitely not drop Algier, especially for Singletary. Pickens has a great fantasy playoff schedule. So you probably want to get him on your team at some point, but not.
Who does he play this week?
This who
Pickens.
Pickens plays the Jets, so
yeah,
that's
a good defense.
Right? Yeah, you can go without Pickens for this week and maybe get him later. But like I said, great fantasy playoff schedule, so try to get him on your team eventually. All right, that's it for tonight. Thanks guys for tuning in, commenting. Really appreciate it. Thanks Andy for joining us once again. Gonna highlight your site, thelogicalapproach.com. Candy has newsletters.
By the way, I wanted to mention that I got the site fixed. If you go down and scroll on the stats and matchups, which I think is the first button, and scroll down and you click now on the college and pro football. There we go. The current week is up there now, and I usually try and get that up there by midday on Wednesday.
Yeah, lots of info.
Sometimes earlier.
Yeah, lots of info on the site. So definitely check it out. Also, Andy said he has the newsletter on the site as well for the teasers and everything else. Yeah, there's a lot here. You have power ratings, futures odds, free daily selections. So
a lot of those have not been updated recently because I've been so swamped with other things that I haven't even been able to put the free selections up there. But I'll be starting that at the end of the week.
Okay, sounds good.
Probably for the weekend, starting at college football Saturday.
Yeah, there's a lot of info here, so definitely check out thelogicalapproach.com. The link's in the description of this video. Thanks once again, guys. We'll be back on Saturday with Tom for our final thoughts on Week 7, and then normal schedule next week. So looking forward to it. Andy, thank you so much for joining us. Love doing the show with you.
It's been a pleasure, as it is always.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, guys, have a good night, and I'll talk to you on Saturday.